Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a dynamic leader whose career spans 2 decades across a variety of roles within the recruitment space. She's done direct sourcing and business development through to large-scale change management, learning development, as well as leadership. And her passion lies with developing teams that are set up for success, creating collaborative and connected solutions within these structures that allow for everyone to perform at a high level. Her strategic approach has been crafted over years and years of hard work, and I'm genuinely so excited to start peeling back the core skills that have allowed her to develop such a career, so that hopefully we can all listen, learn, and improve towards the leadership path in our own jobs. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, Senior Talent Acquisition Manager, Becca Collis. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, like I said, you hopping onto this, and 2 decades is a long time in recruitment space. You, by the way, just as a little heads up to you, you started when I was still at school. I have to put that one out there. But you've seen the face. You've seen a lot. You've changed a lot, I'm sure, in terms of how you've done recruitment. But leadership is kind of a common theme in everything that you've kind of touched, it seems. So I want to dive deeply into leadership from your perspective, how we can obviously dive into it in our own jobs and careers, and hopefully help create the next leaders in whatever path they're on. But before we get to that, I alluded to a question before we hopped on. I said if you've listened to a former podcast, you'll know what's coming. So let's put you to the test. What makes a high performing recruitment team to yourself, Becca?
Yeah. Autonomy, creating teams that are inspired and comfortable in their own space, in their own skill sets, ensuring that they're actually supported in developing their own skills, but also in having confidence in what they're doing and not feeling like when you create a solutions first environment, you end up with people that automatically don't fear that first interaction when they mess up. They're going to mess up, accepting that, looking at how we can mitigate future risk, but more importantly, create an environment where people are comfortable making those mistakes so they can progress. That, to me, that's your start point, but there's a lot of different layers to that. That's a pretty big question.
I know, but I like to see how people answer it. And the long story short for this is that my plan is to get as many of these answers as possible to create like this go-to list of things that TA leaders and aspiring leaders can look at and go, okay, I want to build a high-performing team. And Becca said this, and then such and such said this, and then we start creating, a little bit more of what a high-performing team means in TA. Because everyone has an idea, but let's stitch it all together to create something almost like a blueprint. So you've helped towards that blueprint. So thank you for that. But let's get it back, right? So leadership, management, these two topics are kind of woven together, but let's split them up for a second. What does management mean and what is leadership?
So to me, the reason obviously for this conversation today was because we talked about this, and I find very often management and leadership are used interchangeably as though they're the same thing. And very often you'll have roles that are managers. You won't necessarily always have roles as leaders, but understanding the differences and that one may not be the other, and that a person who has very good management skills may not have the leadership skills and vice versa. And the reason for this is management is much more for me around working towards organisational goals, understanding the structures and the mechanisms that are available for them to leverage for that, looking at how they structure their teams, how they drive those KPIs, etc. So it's much more around the administration of structures that probably are pre-existing in many cases, of processes that already have been made available. Leadership, on the other hand, is much more about innovation. It's about development. It's about people focus, because people will choose to follow a leader. They won't necessarily choose to follow a manager. It's far more likely that leaders will be people that others feel inspired by, rather than necessarily somebody that's driving performance, which we hear a lot of in modern TA systems where efficiency and productivity are watchwords. There's a lot more around the management of logistics, of how a team runs rather than necessarily the focus on how we lead our people. So does that give a bit of flavour for that?
It does, and obviously from my perspective in the TA space, or anyone of us listening, why is it actually important for us in our own careers to be able to distinguish, are we going down the managerial path, or are we working towards being a leader, or why should I care ultimately?
Because it will depend which way you want to go or which way you end up going. Because a lot of the time, let's be honest, a lot of us fell into recruitment. I know very few people that purposefully went, I want a career in recruitment. That's what I'm going to work towards in my university degree or whatever else they did. So when it comes to falling into something, yeah, we're all guilty of that. But if you want to actually have control of that rather than anything else, and why it matters is if you want to be a leader, you need to develop a different skill set. You need to develop certain approaches and capabilities which are different from management. If you want to develop as a manager, you need to be comfortable with data. Everybody's leveraging data for so much in TA these days. And if you want to be able to tell the stories and weave those through the reporting that you're actually delivering to senior management, it's vital that you understand what it is that you're dealing with and that you can actually link that all together and understand your funnel data and be able to explain why there are blockages, etc. If you are going to move into more of a leadership space and that's what inspires you, first of all, you kind of need to be inspired to want to do it because it's not an easy route to take. But secondly, there is a training burden on yourself, the growth mindset that you have to bring if you're going to be a really impactful leader, in my view. A leader is somebody that can't afford to stop learning or can't afford to avoid self-reflection. Those things are really, really important. And so deciding whether you want to go into management or leadership at all, because of course, a lot of organisations are still sitting in that space, assuming everybody who's done well at their job is going to be a manager or a leader, whereas individual contributors can be really good power horses for your business. And they can be incredibly useful because they love what they do. They're really good at it. They're not just tactical, they're strategic in their approach. They're just not interested in the people piece and managing teams or leading teams. And I think that's the other part of it, is being really super clear on what direction do you want to go in? Do you want to be an individual contributor? Do you want to just do a really good job of what you do? Do you want to be somebody who's going to be a manager or somebody who's going to be a leader? Which of those things speaks to you and excites you? I think also you can look at what you're doing in your life outside of work to understand this more and understand yourself more. Because looking at the things that you tend to lean into outside of work will give you a feeling for what you might want to do in work. It's very rare that somebody who is not a leader outside of work in some way, shape or form will be a natural leader in work, in my experience.
Do you think all managers should lead and all leaders should manage?
No. I think all managers should have leadership skills. I do think that. And I think that that is one of the biggest challenges facing TA at the minute, is we've got a lot of people in managerial roles who get frustrated by their teams because they are not delivering, and they will be, the number of times I've heard the line, they've had the training, we've given it to them 3 times now, so they know it. Really. So what have you done as a leader to understand whether they know it? What it is that's stopping them from implementing that training? If they've had the training and they understand it, first of all, have you checked that? But secondly, what are the barriers that are stopping them from implementing that change? What is it that's in the way of them doing that job? And that is why I think all managers need to have leadership qualities. There may not be the perfect leaders, depending on the level that they're at, etc. But their job will be 100% easier if they develop leadership skills. Whereas the other way around, there's absolutely no need for somebody who has natural leadership skills to be a manager of people. They might be, leaders can take so many different shapes within any organisation. They can be thought leaders, they can be people who are project leaders. And I mean, in terms of leading that project rather than leading the individuals within it. They may be somebody that simply inspires others to be able to be better at certain things. So certainly one doesn't necessarily mean the other, but with managers, I do think that all managers need leadership skills.
See, I'm trying to draw a connection to talent acquisition and what I see quite often. So I hire a lot of software engineers. So
Yeah.
I see a lot of staff engineers and principal engineers are leaders, and they always say to me, like, I want to lead people, but I don't want to lead on day-to-day people. I want to inspire them, and they use those phrases. And there's a lady, her name's Andrea. She's been one of our guests before. She runs Talent Crunch Berlin. She is a massive believer on principal recruiters, and they are on an equal footing to, the most senior member in the team, if that's how you're structured. On a strategic level, it's a strategic role, but you're focusing on recruitment, not people management side. Why don't we see, do you think, as many of these kind of staff roles, principal roles in recruitment teams?
I think the simple answer to that is it's businesses aren't thinking their way around it yet. When I first came into recruitment, it was very much that everybody wanted to get into management, regardless of whether they wanted to manage people, they wanted to get into management because that's the progression. It's a bit like if we take it to a more every person setting, when you're a young person, you think about the fact that you need to get a job, you need to have a house, you need to have a cat or a dog, you need to have another half, perhaps you then get married, perhaps you then have a kid, and then you hit this point where like, well, I've got everything, so why isn't it all working? Why am I not like living in this castle and
Why am
it's
I
all
not
brilliant?
happy anymore?
Yes, exactly, because you've done all the things, you've crossed all the dots and dotted all the T's one way round. But we can do it that way around. But the reality is, again, people have this vision or had this vision historically that was what you would do. And I think that that's what we got stuck with in recruitment is we haven't really solved for that yet. And certainly when I was at AMS, one of the things that I would talk with one of our senior leaders with on a regular basis was how do we create these pathways for our individual contributors? How do we make sure that those people have a direction to go in within our industry and are recognised at that seniority level and can reach board level? Because why not? Why should somebody who is a really skilled person at what they do and absolutely that strategic leader, that thought leader in that space, why is it we don't have the mechanism to support them? And so I think it is something that businesses have to start looking at in much greater detail now, very simply because they're losing these people. These people get to a point in the business, they try a bit of leadership perhaps, or try a bit of management, they have a little team, and then they go, I really hate this. And then if they're told, well, it's either you take a drop and you come back down the ladder or you leave. And so that has to change. What we all have to be looking at the moment within the bigger teams function areas is how do we create space for those people and how do we reward them for being that good at what they're doing, but also how do we challenge them? How do we continue to evolve that role? And I think because it's that individual contributor piece, it's more complex for businesses because we know if you go up a tier system and you're going into, let's say, a team leader, then you're going to a manager, then you're going into senior, blah, 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 blah. That structure is easy to see and you can understand the competencies that somebody might have to display and the skills they might have to grow in order to fit that criteria because they are a grade level change. But when you're talking about a grade level change for somebody who is a technical expert in what they do and a strategic expert, you've got to really recreate what that step looks like. And I think the basis of this is, or the really sad part about this is, a lot of businesses just haven't focused on that yet. And I do think it is a missed opportunity because there are a lot of these people. As you've talked about software developers, I've seen the same thing with them, where you've gone in and these people are incredibly skilled and really good, and they get thrust into a management role just because they're good at what they do in their day job. And suddenly they've got to deal with all these people skills that they didn't know they needed. And they don't want to be there. So they jump ship. They go to another company. And
I'll
it's
be honest
years
with you, that is
before.
typically what I find. If someone's been in, and this is a little piece of advice to anyone, if someone is hiring for a senior, target team leaders in the last year who's taken that switch, and you'll be surprised how many will move back.
It's true.
Little
It's
inkling for
exactly
you.
that.
I think just my own experience, that perception by the way you say, like, get the job, get a career ladder, step up, step up, step up. That's how I was always taught as well. And I think it's also because we're in recruitment, there's not many companies who are really owning that principal route without creating ridiculously wild expectations around it, make this amount of hires, build this amount, depending if you're internal or external, and it almost becomes unattainable. So people look at it and go, maybe that route is a little bit easier because that's the path that's making it more obtainable. And because there's not enough people sitting there going, hey, I'm a leader, but I don't want to manage, that's why it's not become maybe the forefront of the conversation. You mentioned a few skills, thought leaders are going to obtain. You mentioned growth mindset, right?
Mhm.
What other specific skills or underlying traits do you see? So I want to park the management side. I want to focus on leaders because leaders are going to be every single person essentially, right? So what skills can we try to recognize in ourselves that we can sit back and go, okay, I have this or I don't have this that you thought is fundamental to kind of take action in this career path?
I think fundamentally that growth mindset is a really big one. And that doesn't have to be in specifically demonstrated in the job role that you're in at that time necessarily. It might be that you've hit a point and there isn't an opportunity to learn more within that area. You're in a box. But growth mindset is everything. So it can be anything outside of work. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're trying to learn more about. You're trying to critically analyze information to understand juxtapositions and exposing yourself to different types of people. This is one of the fundamentals, I think, of leadership that gets missed sometimes, is in order for us to actually be inclusive and diverse, there needs to be a focus on creating opportunities for us to meet people who are not like us. We all have different experiences of growing up. I grew up in villages. I grew up in an environment where there just wasn't much diversity. It was literally everyone was white. Everyone was from particular types of backgrounds. And so being in the position where you're actually exposing yourself to different types of people, different environments, spending time around those kinds of people is one of the things that I think is really important. So growing your ability to see the power in difference and to start tackling some of your own unconscious bias. But then that also feeds into another thing, which is a fundamental skill of every leader I've come across that's actually really powerful, is they're very, very focused on self-reflection. They spend a lot of time looking internally, asking for feedback, because feedback is an absolute fundamental of anybody who wants to work in or work on their leadership skills. Understanding not just what you think you're doing to some or impacting or how you're landing, actually going and asking people. And by that, I don't mean the standard question of, have you got any feedback for me? Can you tell me a little bit about, I'd like some feedback on me. That is literally the worst question to ask somebody if you want
Makes
feedback, in
it
my
feel so
opinion.
awkward. 'Cause you're like,
Yeah.
okay, let me judge you for a second. Instead of giving me something actionable, let me evaluate you. And then you also slightly know they're going to take it personally. That's also the problem.
Absolutely. But creating that ability to actually understand yourself because you're presenting it in an easy way to digest. I've done it in a bit of a weird roundabout way. For instance, once there was a particular manager I was working with and we were not getting on. We were just butting heads all the time. Every time we were trying to push stuff forward, I was getting frustrated. I knew he was getting frustrated. And so I was like, right, okay, I've got to do something about this because I'm waiting and waiting and nothing's happening. It's not getting
Yeah.
any better. And I'm trying all of the things. So I actually went into a meeting and I said, look, I brought the elephant out in the room. I can see that, that there's a bit of a clash with the way we're working together at the minute. What can I do to help us to work better together? How can I change my approach that in order for us to actually push forward as a team? It's a hard question to ask because when you go into that particular situation, again, as you say, people don't like feedback. To begin with, it can be a bit painful. But I think being able to sit there, listen to it, thank somebody for providing it to you, and then take it away and critically analyze that as well. So you're not just taking it and going, oh, woe is me, I'm terrible, the world hates me. You're going away and you're going, okay, so they said these things. My experience are these things. I've asked other people of their opinions and they've given me this feedback. Do I think that this thing needs to change, or how do I think this thing needs to change that I'm doing? The other piece, though, when we're coming to sort of the skills of leadership, The focus on people is a key. So being interested in people and being interested in engagement in that way. If you're going to be a people leader, that's the focus. If you're going to be somebody who is a leader of other things, i.e. you're going to be a project leader or you're going to be a thought leader in a space, having an interest in how other people are impacted by your story, you still need an interest in people. So that one's a fundamental for me. Also being comfortable with the fact that we're on a changing landscape and change is positive and we can bring that positive approach to it. But the other piece is being creative, because it's, if you don't bring different ideas to that space, then again, what you tend to find is you'll stagnate and then you'll sit into that administrative function. You're falling much more into the management area of processes or the actual people than you would be bringing something new to the table. And being really comfortable and drawing that out of other people, because whatever leadership role you're in, you don't have all the answers. And that's the beauty, is you don't have to. You have to be in a position where you can inspire other people to feel comfortable coming to you with ideas and expressing crazy thoughts off the, anything that's just a little bit nuts. Sometimes that's really handy, because you can then either take that and shape it, or it can suddenly bring something brilliant to the table. So I think that there's quite a raft of different attributes that are really important. I also think that from a people leadership space, you can develop leadership skills, but there are some people who are simply born that way. And when
I was about to ask, are leaders born or developed? Because there's always that old adage that, great leaders are born. So you believe that people are natural leaders in this, or some people are natural?
Some are. I mean, and it's like any other skill. You're born, all of us have particular things that we will be naturally more likely to be good at, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. You might have really good hand-eye coordination from really young. You might have an affinity with animals. It just might be that they really connect with you and you really connect with them. You might be great with kids. I mean, there's so many different things that will tend to fall into that. Leadership I see in a similar kind of way. And the reason why I say that is because if we can all think of those people from our childhood that were just the leaders in the room. They weren't commanding it. They didn't ask for it. People would constantly select them if there was something that they needed a leader for. It wouldn't be that they would volunteer. They'd be voluntold by the rest of the people in the space. Oh, we want you, or you can do that, or we'll follow you. Where are you going? And the reality is those people have a head start. It doesn't mean that other people can't be really great leaders, but they're going to have to work at it a lot harder than somebody that has that start point. Having said that, if that person doesn't actually push on that button hard, like for instance, you've got someone who's swimming at, I don't know, national level at the age of 14, if they then stop swimming, the other people that couldn't even swim at 10 will pass them. So the whole turtle and hare piece comes in as well.
Do you think that there's an element of, and to that point you were saying, I'm thinking back to my own school days, to be honest. It's generally the more extroverted individuals, the more popular individuals who would be told, as you just said there, they were kind of being the ones that people would lead. But do you think you need to be that way to be a good leader?
No, I don't think you need to be extroverted.
I'm so glad you said that.
It's they're the obvious. Just because you're the loudmouth in the room and just because people are drawn towards you, testing those individuals and seeing actually how well they lead very quickly turns people into choosing not to follow them if they're just all mouth and no trousers, for instance, as the phrase goes. But the reality for me is I know a lot of introverts who are exceptional leaders, but they have, the really great thing about them is if they happen to interact with a really good leader who's comfortable and already in that space and already leading, they will usually identify that introvert and they will then pull that introvert into a comfortable light. It might not be comfortable straight away, but it sometimes takes another leader to pull that out of an introvert, whereas it doesn't necessarily for an extrovert. Because an introvert may not have even identified those qualities in themselves. Very often I find they need a little bit more support and encouragement. But like in in social situations, I find that very often introverts and extroverts work very well together, because an introvert will love the shade that's thrown on them by the extrovert who wants all of the stage. So between them, they actually create an incredibly compelling team very often.
Do you think, I mean, coming back to the element of, leaders can kind of fit into any sort of role, we can also do it at any point in our careers. How can we actually start, I guess, how can we start influencing our own careers? Say someone's listening to this right now, and they're a year into their recruitment journey, or maybe they're leading a team already for 4 years, and they still want to just kick on a little bit further. What kind of elements would you focus on, or what would you recommend people kind of try to focus on to improve their leadership skills?
I think it's a really good question. I think when it comes to people developing in that particular aspect, is like any other aspect. So I believe in having personal development plans not linked with company goals. So if you have organizational goals over here, that's what you need to do your job. Having those on your PDP to me is crazy. A personal development plan is about you as an individual and how you're going to grow. So having one of those in the first place is really, really key. But having one that you have had input into as an individual, where you're designing, where do I want to be and what are the steps I believe I need to take to get there? What are the tools, support, mentorship, etc. that I'm going to need to attain that particular goal? And so breaking that down into chunks can be really helpful. And those chunks might not be inside of work. If you've got a year in your career as a recruiter, the chances are you're not going to have that many opportunities to lead somebody else if it's a very lean machine, which a lot of them are at the moment. You might have the chance to volunteer to support someone's induction or help somebody to upskill on a particular capability. And certainly looking for those opportunities is a key part for me. It's looking around you. What am I really good at already that I think I could help somebody else to develop a skill in? And how can I get them to want to work with me to do that? Because that really is a lot of it as well, is understanding how you get people to trust you, how you get people to choose to follow your lead on something. But you can do this outside of work. I mean, if you're looking at what you do socially, perhaps you're in a team, perhaps you play team sports, or perhaps you want to go along and learn how to public speak, etc., etc. Going into these environments and looking at where there are opportunities for you to grow your leadership skills within a social setting, being a youth club leader, looking at scouts, those kinds of things can offer those kinds of opportunities as well for you to develop your skills. But the fundamental first step of all of this is to understand who you are in the first place. And I think a lot of us really struggle with that. So
that's a big question to ask yourself. I mean,
who am I? That's
yeah.
essential.
How much time we got for this one? How would I start that process? Not the whole thing, but say, because I think a lot of people deep down would say, yeah, I know what I want, I know where I'm going, I know what drives me. But when you really know the 5 whys and you really probe deeper, I imagine a lot of us will probably stump at like 2 or 3 whys, and then we'll kind of get, oh shit, maybe that's not what I want. Maybe that's not what drives me. So how do I really start that reflective, introspective process? And I mean, I'm happy to try it with myself. So you can ask me questions if it's a thing to do that. But start that process.
I think the first start point for any real understanding of self is, first of all, reflecting on what you think you know about yourself and actually testing some of that. So there are many, many tools out there. You can go through and do free online tools that you can use to do sort of self-assessment. I find them interesting, but I also find that they very rarely summarize me as I think I am, which is interesting in itself. Maybe that tells you more about me than it does them. But what I think is an incredibly reliable tool is actually going out and soliciting feedback from colleagues, from friends, from people that you know, but soliciting it in a way that people can actually feel comfortable providing it. Now, one of the ways that I've done this, which I think is incredibly powerful, is creating a list of 3 or 4 words that you think are all attributes that you have that you're really proud of, and sending an email out to a number of people, usually about 5, with those attributes, and ask people which are most likely, rank them most to least, and why is the one least like you? What is it you could do to develop in that area? It can be really illuminating because, first of all, you'll get to see how many of those 5 people say the same thing. Because then it might be something you're like, well, hang on a minute, I now know that's something that other people think I need to work on, or perhaps I'm not showing people. So that's one of the aspects, one of the ways in which you can do it. There are other tools where you can sit down.
On that one a second, sorry. So those 4 attributes, these are things that you personally sit back and go, that is me. That's me down to a T. So you're purposely putting 4 things in there that you fully believe, and then naturally you're going to get from the 5 people one that they don't think as much. I mean, they still might think it of you, but it's the least one. Okay, that's interesting. And are you putting skills down specifically? Like, for example, change manager, like, proactive listener, things like that. So you're putting skills down in those attributes,
Words.
or you put
So,
in,
for instance, adaptability would be one
okay,
that you might have down there. Being a great coach might be another one that you have down there. Being somebody who is innovative might be one that you have down there. And it's ranking. It's, as I say, it's picking those things, but making sure that they are all things that you think are attributes that you show in large numbers, and then getting that feedback. Also inviting people to feedback on each one of the other attributes as well. So where is it that I've demonstrated this, or how is it that you think I've evidenced that I have this particular attribute? That if you get people to spend that time, you can also offer in return to do the same for them if they'd like it. I don't know how many people would say thank you. Yes, let's do that. But the reality
I'll
is,
wait for you to rip my my attributes apart. Please give me more feedback.
But it's a start point. And then
Yeah.
even beyond that, if you're feeling really brave, is to then, when you get that feedback, is to arrange to speak with that person. Say, what I'd like to do now, I love what you've done here. It's been really helpful. I'd like to dig into this a little bit more to understand what your thoughts were around X, Y, Z. But then it's also being comfortable, as I say, reflecting on that. And one of the things that I struggled with when I was young, which, I've been in leadership roles for a long time, and I actually found it really, really hard listening to negative feedback, because immediately I'd be battering myself over the head going, oh no, I'm terrible. I could never get any better. And that thing's awful. And I would literally be self-flagellating over the whole thing for a period of time and very sad. I think the important thing is you have to be getting yourself into a place as rapidly as possible where feedback does not destroy you, it inspires you. And once you get to that, it's incredibly powerful, because it gives you the opportunity to discard that which you think is more about that individual than it is about you, and to take on that which you think, actually, I could do something about that, and I think I'd like to do something about that. It's very empowering then, because then it helps you to develop what is it, where is it I'm missing skills within this that I need. Also, even just writing down what typical leadership skills you think you need to have as a leader, and asking people to rate them. Which one do I have the most of? Which do I demonstrate most commonly and least commonly? Because, for instance, coaching is one that I think is a massive, massive need for anybody that works in leadership. And yet I have trained people in coaching and been really quite dumbfounded with the number of people that don't understand what coaching is, who are in senior leadership roles, who have never experienced it. I was in a webinar probably about a year ago or so, and there was a chap on the webinar. It was a leadership, because I was doing a transformational leadership apprenticeship myself. And on this particular webinar, this chap, they asked the room, has anyone ever been coached before? What experience have we got of coaching in the room? Middle-aged guy says, oh yeah, I was coached for the first time last week. And I'm like, wow, last week. And this is the thing, is it does exist that people haven't had that experience. As leaders, we are very comfortable. And that's the other thing that happens a lot in recruitment, is leaders will tell people what to do. They'll direct people who are less mature in their role, or people that are mature in their role but aren't necessarily delivering. They will direct them as to what they want them to do and how they want them to do it. And then people get frustrated because they're not making progress, or because that team member's still not performing. Whereas when you coach them, when you actually look at what they're doing and ask more questions and give them the reins of that opportunity to develop, you see a lot more positive change. in any role, but particularly in TA, we don't have time necessarily to deliver what I would call genuine coaching sessions that often that are pure coaching. But we do have the opportunity to bring it into our everyday and blend it with some of the directive stuff that we've got to deliver, because we do know how to do this. I've got to show you because you need to do it this way. With actually, this is where we need to get to. What do you think are the solutions for how we're going to attain that, and how can we approach that? How can you take this forward?
So my former manager, he was very, very good at that. He was a very, very good coach. And yeah, I mean, I've had many managers in my life. He would always ask, "What do you think? How would you get to that? What do you?" And sometimes, as at that point, hands-on recruiter, I would get frustrated because I'm like, "No, just tell me the answer because I just need to move on. Like, I just need to get on with my day to day." But then now more mature, I'm reflected back, thinking, "Okay, actually, you're helping me understand perception of what's happening in this scenario, and you'll help me find the solution myself, and you've taken me on that journey." So I've seen that, and also I've been on the other side where it's like, no, just do that. And you're right, if it doesn't go well, I look and go, well, you told me to do that. I done what you told me to do, and then you get like this negative thing. It's like, well, you're meant to think for yourself. It's like, but you told me to do it like this and do it like that, and I done it like this and I done it like that, and we didn't get the results, and now we're having this awkward conversation again. So
This
I've
is
seen both
exactly.
sides of it. The
I mean,
go on.
my favourite example of this is nothing to do with recruitment. It's to do with kids. So
Nice.
kids for me are a really, really good example of this. In as much as my daughter, when she was really, really young, wanted to tie her shoelaces. And I mean,
Oh, we're in that stage
really,
now.
they want to tie their shoelaces, they want to put their coat on, and you're literally trying to get out the door because as parents, when you've got young kids, for some reason, we're doing everything at the wire. We're literally, all right, we need to get out the door. And they're there going, I've got one lace and the other. And you're literally going, and the
No,
reality is,
mummy, I'm doing it. No. And then they have a
yes,
little meltdown, like, no, I'm doing it. Like, okay, come on.
and this is exactly, and what we end up doing is very often we end up falling back on the, oh, just let me do it. And what we then have, and what I've eventually found with her was we were on a particular day, we weren't mega against the wire. We'd got a few minutes. And she was doing her usual, getting a little bit stroppy and leaning away from me because she was trying to do a shoelace. And she said, no, let me try. I need to do this. And it suddenly occurred to me, and there's kind of a light bulb moment where I just thought, oh my God, I'm actually not giving her the chance to learn how to do it, because she was never getting to finish the task, which meant that every time we went to go out the door, she wasn't fast enough to be able to deliver it. She wasn't able to finish the task. And when I actually factored in that extra few minutes so that she could spend the time doing it and actually deliberately manufactured that one time, I didn't have to tie shoelaces when we went out the door. She felt happy, there was no meltdown, and she could own that task. So like you in the recruitment office going, for crying out loud, I did exactly what you told me and it still didn't work. Well, that basically means you've taken all the responsibility off the individual, and you've taken all the responsibility away from you to perform
Yeah,
as an
I've learnt my
individual.
lesson on this. Don't worry, I'm not like that now, but I have learnt my lesson on that one. It's
It is
that was
powerful though.
that was
Kids
young
are
Eden
really
recruiter.
precious.
But on the kids one, I see that a lot. But I also found out that waking up half an hour earlier helps with that, and it means we're not as rushed. So I'm trying to teach my other half this as well, and she does listen to this podcast. So Paige, if you are listening now, next time on Monday when we have to take her into nursery, please wake up half hour because I have the Ring doorbell app. So she starts nursery at 8, and I see that app go off at 8:01. I'm like, well, it takes 10 minutes to get to nursery, so you're already late. So clearly something happened. Anyways, off topic.
Judgment. Sorry, Paige.
Hey, hey, hey. It's a judge-free zone in our household. Just get her on time. I think it's because I came from a family where we were always late to everything, and it used to it used to get to me.
Irk you. It
create
irks,
create
doesn't
that
it?
inner anxiety of like, I'm going to go in late. Everyone's going to be looking at me. My daughter is not even 3, so she doesn't care. She's like, yeah, I've got Daisy. I've got my dress on. Look at me, everyone. I'll be centre of attention when I come in. So, anyways, Becca, it's been a genuine pleasure to kind of peel this back with you. I think there's a lot of things about this that hopefully someone who's listening is going to sit there and go, Leadership is for everyone. It's not just for my manager. It's not just for my manager's manager. I can do this today. And there's a lot of skills that you've shown at least to start the process of that journey. If someone wants to pick this up further with you and get to know you a bit better, have a discussion with you, where's the best place they can find you?
Probably the best place is to ping me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly easy to find. So yeah, just drop me a DM, just connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a DM. More than happy to have conversations with people around this. It's a pet subject.
And thank you so much for spending the time. I do appreciate it.
No worries.
Enjoy.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Thanks, Eden. Bye.